What if I told you that the most powerful weapon ever used against the West was not a missile, not a tank, not even an army. It was oil, and it was wielded by a man of Quran. A man who stood before the might of America and said, "We live before oil, and we will live after oil." This man shook the world without firing a single bullet. He carried Islam into the United Nations. He defended Al-Aqsa when others stayed silent. He dreamed of uniting the Ummah, and he paid the ultimate price. His name was King Faisal, the Lion of Arabia, the last great king. Peace be upon you. I'm Alam al-Tariq. Today, we uncover the untold story of a king who stood fearless against the world's most powerful nation. A leader who defended Palestine, challenged America, and shook the balance of global power. This is the story of King Faisal, the lion who changed the Muslim world. Let's begin. The year was 1967. Muslims around the world were in despair. Jerusalem had fallen under Israeli control. Palestine was bleeding. The Ummah was humiliated. And yet, in the deserts of Arabia, one man rose. Not as a conqueror with swords, but as a leader with faith, vision, and courage. He was raised in simplicity, educated in Quran, shaped by the harsh winds of the desert. But when the time came, he stood in the palaces of kings, the halls of the United Nations, and the pages of history, carrying the banner of Islam in an age of nationalism, betrayal, and colonial shadows. This is not just the biography of a king. It is the story of a man who turned oil into a shield of honor, who revived the dignity of Muslims on the world stage, and who was silenced not by enemies abroad, but by betrayal at home. This is the story of Shah Faisal, the last great king. The year was 1906. A child was born in Riyadh, in a world where Islam seemed to have lost its crown. Just 7 years before, the Ottoman Caliphate, the last great Islamic empire, had been called the sick man of Europe. Colonial powers circled like vultures. Britain ruled India. France had swallowed North Africa. Palestine, Syria, Iraq, all carved up like pieces of bread on a European table. The Ummah was broken, and in the Arabian Peninsula itself, the situation was worse than many realize. The Holy Kaaba, the house of Allah, the center of the Muslim world, was neglected, surrounded by poverty and tribal wars. Pilgrims came to Mecca with fear, not peace. Bandits attacked caravans. There was no electricity, no clean water, no organization. The land of revelation had become a land of chaos. And in this chaos, young Faisal grew. He was the son of Abdulaziz ibn Saud, the warrior who would one day unify Arabia into the kingdom of Saudi Arabia. From childhood, Faisal was trained not in luxury, but in hardship. He rode horses through the desert. He learned the Quran by heart. At just 13 years old, he was sent as an ambassador to Britain and France, a boy among men, representing Islam before colonial empires. Imagine it, a teenager in the palaces of Europe, wearing a simple Arab cloak, reciting verses of Quran, while kings in suits and crowns stared at him in shock. This was no ordinary boy. This was a seed of leadership planted in the desert, destined to shake the world. But to understand Faisal's rise, we must understand his mission, because he didn't just want to be a king. He wanted to revive Islam in an age when the world thought it was finished. Faisal was not raised in the shadows of palaces. He was raised in the heat of battle, the discipline of Quran, and the vision of his father, Abdulaziz ibn Saud. From a young age, Faisal was trusted with missions far beyond his years. At just 20 years old, he led military campaigns to secure the Hijaz, the sacred land of Mecca and Medina. Picture it, the Kaaba, surrounded by centuries of neglect. The Masjid al-Nabawi, worn, quiet, and unprotected. Pilgrims coming for Hajj in fear, attacked by raiders, dying from thirst. And then, a new era began. With the unification of the Arabian Peninsula under King Abdulaziz, the Haramain were finally safe. Faisal took charge of overseeing the holy cities. He worked to modernize them, not with arrogance, but with service. Water wells were dug, hospitals were built, electricity lit the streets of Mecca and Medina for the first time in history. The house of Allah was no longer in darkness. It was protected, revived, honored. But Faisal's vision didn't stop at the Kaaba. He knew the Ummah needed more than just safety for pilgrims. It needed dignity. It needed revival. In the 1950s and 60s, the Muslim world was drowning in the tides of secularism and nationalism. Leaders rose who mocked Islam, who wanted to erase the Quran from public life. Egypt's Gamal Abdel Nasser promised Arab nationalism without Islam. Others bowed to the West, trading faith for weapons and oil money. But Faisal, he stood firm. He said, "Our constitution is the Quran. Our strength is Islam. Without it, we are nothing." And with those words, he became more than a king. He became a symbol of resistance. But the true test of Faisal's leadership would come, not in Arabia, not in speeches, but in Jerusalem. It was June 1967. The Muslim world watched in shock. In just 6 days, Israel defeated the combined armies of Egypt, Jordan, and Syria. And in those 6 days, Al-Quds, Jerusalem, the city of the prophets, was lost. Al-Aqsa Mosque, the first Qibla of Islam, the place where the prophet ascended on Isra wal Miraj, fell under occupation. The images spread like wildfire. Israeli flags waving over the Dome of the Rock. Muslims crying in the streets. An Ummah humiliated, shattered, leaderless. For many rulers, it was just another political defeat. But for Faisal, it was a wound in his soul. He declared, "The first Qibla of Islam is under attack. If we abandon Al-Aqsa, we abandon our deen. If we stay silent, we are not Muslims."
ماذا ننتظر؟ إن القدس الشريف يناديكم ويستغيث بكم أيها الإخوة لتنقذوه من محنته ومما ابتلي به. فماذا يخيفنا؟ هل نخشى الموت؟ وهل هناك موتة أفضل وأكرم من أن يموت الإنسان مجاهدا في سبيل الله؟
And from that moment, Shah Faisal became more than the king of Saudi Arabia. He became the voice of Jerusalem. He called on Arab and Muslim leaders. Unite. Defend Al-Aqsa. Put aside your divisions. But many ignored him. Some mocked him. Others feared the West too much to speak. Yet Faisal did not stop. He traveled across the Muslim world, building alliances. He strengthened ties with Pakistan, Sudan, Morocco, and others, not just for politics, but for Islam. He said, "The Quran unites us more than blood. If we cannot unite for Al-Aqsa, then when will we unite?" But Faisal knew speeches alone would not free Al-Aqsa. The West had weapons. The West had money. The West had power. So how could a Muslim king fight back without an army? By the early 1970s, the Muslim world stood humiliated. Al-Aqsa was still under occupation. Western powers treated Muslim nations like pawns, controlling their resources, dictating their politics, mocking their faith. But Shah Faisal was no ordinary king. He held something the world desperately needed. Not armies, not nuclear bombs, but oil, black gold, the fuel of every car, the bloodline of every economy. The one thing the West could not live without. And Faisal knew it. When the Yom Kippur War broke out in 1973, Egypt and Syria fighting to reclaim their lands, Faisal made his move. He called an emergency meeting of Arab oil producers. And with the calmness of a believer and the strength of a lion, he declared, "If America and the West continue to arm Israel, we will cut off their oil." And they did. Tankers stopped sailing. Pipelines were shut. The oil tap of the Arab world was closed. And for the first time in modern history, the world trembled at the word of a Muslim king. Gas stations in America ran dry. Long lines stretched for miles. Prices quadrupled overnight. Western economies collapsed into crisis. And newspapers across the globe carried one headline: King Faisal uses oil as a weapon. But Faisal corrected them. He said, "It is not a weapon. It is our wealth, and we will not allow our wealth to be used against our brothers in Palestine." For millions of Muslims, Faisal became a hero. The first leader in centuries to make the West bow, not through violence, but through strategy. He reminded the Ummah that dignity is not lost, that one believer with tawakkul in Allah can shake empires. But such defiance comes with a price. And for Faisal, that price was his life. March 25th, 1975. Riyadh. The kingdom was calm, the people at peace. King Faisal had just returned from prayers, ready to receive a delegation from Kuwait. It seemed like an ordinary day, but destiny had written something else. As the Kuwaiti delegation entered the royal palace, Faisal's own nephew, Prince Faisal bin Musaid, slipped inside. He approached the king, and as the ruler of the Muslim world leaned forward to greet him, collision 2 shots were fired, one to the head, one to the neck. The Lion of Islam collapsed instantly. Shockwaves ripped across the palace. Guards screamed. Ministers froze in disbelief. And within hours, the news spread like wildfire. King Faisal is dead. The man who had defied empires. The man who raised the Quran in the face of kings. The man who brought dignity back to the Ummah had been struck down not by his enemies abroad, but by betrayal from within his own family. To this day, questions linger. Was it personal revenge? A family feud? Or was there a foreign hand hidden behind the trigger? Many believe the West, humiliated by the oil embargo, had a hand in his assassination. But the truth remains shrouded in mystery. What is certain is that with those gunshots, the Ummah lost more than a king. It lost a symbol, a beacon of courage, a leader who feared none but Allah. When the funeral was held, millions wept. From the deserts of Arabia, to the streets of Cairo, to the mosques of Pakistan, Muslims mourned a man they called Faisal the martyr. But was his death the end of his story? Or the beginning of a legacy that still calls to us today?